Well, hi everyone, this is Dr. Shoto with this week's video introduction to week number 8 in our course in healthcare research. And actually, we've come down to our last week. This is our last week of class. We've covered a lot of territory. In week number 7, we wrapped up our discussion of the concepts related to qualitative research. And this week specifically focused our discussion on talking about the research methodology and a little bit more about transferability and the idea of how results from a study can be transferable across different populations, which is always a little bit of a tricky proposition. Even going back to our discussion in quantitative research, really that decision is ultimately left up to the consumer of the study, the person that reads the study, to determine if the results really pertain to a particular target population that they're particularly interested in. The Lin study, Lin and Lee study that we've been looking at, this study specifically addresses the characteristics and the phenomenology of a group of Taiwanese patients receiving hemodialysis. And it's difficult to really extrapolate the results much farther than that particular population, although a researcher that was interested in hemodialysis in Asian patients may feel that their target population meets the same demographics and may be able to make some of the same inferences, at least in the values and attitudes and thoughts about hemodialysis towards a similar population of patients. But it would be difficult to take those results and extrapolate them across, for example, an Asian American population, or one that in one of the U.S. countries. Even among the U.S., the Asian cultures where I primarily live in Southern California are remarkably different, quite a bit different than the Asian cultures that you might find, for example, in New York or in the Pacific Northwest. They're different. They're different groups. Same lineage, a lot of the same values and attitudes, but not entirely. They've all lived a little bit of a different experience. The Koliazi method is a method that is not really widely used. It is one that you see mentioned in the literature every so often. And as we've discussed, the Koliazi method, really the only thing that makes it different from most of the mainstream qualitative methods is it's this process where at the end of the study you go back and the researcher says, okay, everybody that participated, here's what we came up with. What do you think? Do the results match? The idea is not so much to try to see if everybody says no. It's not usually conceivable in a study where everybody's going to sit back and say, no, we think that you really missed the whole idea. You missed what we were saying. But what is fairly common is that the subjects might say, it's interesting that you picked up that. That sort of brings up some other things that weren't mentioned that you may want to know. And so again, it just kind of sort of helps push things towards that data saturation, that point at which the researchers have really got all the information that's usable about a particular population. This particular study did not really use a true Koliazi method, even though it is listed as a Koliazi study. They only went back, at least as far as when I read the study, it looks like they talked to one participant, which isn't really truly Koliazi. It's Koliazi-like, I suppose you could say. But either only went back and talked to one participant, or they just very poorly worded their study. It also came up in the discussion that Lee and Lin were the two primary researchers. My guess is that one of them was probably working on her PhD for this particular study, even though each of them had some experience with qualitative research. I think that really one of them was probably going for the PhD, and that Mr. Hicks, who was in Chicago, was probably a mentor and probably a coach, and likely was a dissertation chair. And so that's how his name became involved with this, and that's why his job was primarily, as indicated in the study, to go through and review and add a little bit to the manuscript about the method. And that process is actually very common. In fact, some of you will probably be asked at some point by some of your instructors to perhaps work collaboratively on a publishable work. And so although I'm not absolutely certain that that's what happened here, certainly Lee and Lin did the real research, And Hicks was really kind of almost more like a consultant working outside of the study itself, reviewing the methodology, giving feedback, and helping to polish that final paperwork. So, and also in week 7, you completed your qualitative studies, or excuse me, qualitative critiques. I will be reviewing those and have the grades done this week. Remember, everything's kind of on a little bit of a advanced, kind of a sort of on a quick, we got to get it done fast because Friday is the last day of class. Really, grades are due on Friday. That means that everything really has to wrap up by Thursday. So for this last week of class, your initial discussion questions are due on Tuesday, and your responses to peers are due on Thursday. I'm not going to be nearly so picky about the posting on the same day because you just don't have the entire week this week, and I understand that. So if you want to make your post on the same day this week, it's perfectly acceptable to do that. I'll talk about that discussion question in a second, but the other thing due this week is your final exam. The final exam is open now. It will stay open through Thursday evening. You must take it by Thursday evening. It shuts off Thursday evening because final scores for the class will be completely done on Friday and submitted sometime on Friday, possibly submitted actually on the weekend, but they need to be, everything in the class needs to be finished by Friday. So please be sure that you get your final exam done. Let me know if you have any issues with that, and I will help you problem solve that. Week number 8 is our final discussion, and something that we've never really touched on directly, but you have read in every single study that you've reviewed for this class is on the Institutional Review Board. Institutional review is a very important process. Every organization that does any form of research at all, be it big, be it small, all research, all published research that is peer-reviewed, that becomes part of the official literature, must be peer-reviewed. And peer review means, in large part, that it has to meet IRB approval. And so this week we're going to be talking about IRB. In most studies, it kind of just gets a passing glance, something along the lines of Institutional Review Board approval was received, and you may be another couple of lines about the IRB process. But for the most part, really all that researchers do is put in their studies that we got IRB approval. But believe me, that IRB process is actually very time consuming, and that a lot of work goes onto that IRB. There's a whole application that must be completed to apply for a study. And the study is then classified depending upon how vulnerable the population is or how much at risk the population may be. And so that's going to be the focus this week. You're going to be reviewing a study of a vulnerable population, of a preterm infant population. And we're going to talk specifically, not so much about the study itself, although that will no doubt come up, but really mostly focusing on what are the ethics inherent in this particular study. How would you handle it? What are the ethical issues that you see? Every once in a while it comes up that, when we do a study where, subjects are, for example, if we remember the Kolkaba study, the hand massage study, occasionally students will say, is it really ethical to do a study like that because we're imposing a new nursing intervention on patients that are dying? Is it appropriate to do that? And the answer is it may be if the results actually may show some benefit. The only way to really study things are sometimes when we're dealing with these vulnerable populations. So we'll be talking about that. You'll also be reviewing information about the Tuskegee experiment, which is a very seminal study in nursing research. So I will let you basically read and learn about that, and it will no doubt come up in the discussions as well. So I look forward in this last week of discussion with you. Remember, if you haven't done so already, please submit end of course survey. I use those. We need those. I use them personally. Your feedback helps me to come up with new technologies, for example, like doing these videos. I started doing these videos because I got a generally good response from students. And so your feedback is very helpful. And it helps me to be a better teacher, and it helps the school in making sure that we're right on target. So I look forward to being in class with you. This will be my last video. So I bid you all a wonderful rest of your educational journey as you continue on. meeting your educational goals. I look forward to hopefully having some of you later on in some of your capstone courses and being professional colleagues with you. So God bless, continue on, and I look forward to seeing you in class.